like them either, so he did what he does best, crack down. Beijing has made new rules and they're bleeding China's gaming companies. The stock market saw a bloodbath today. Top gaming companies in China suffered big losses to the tune of $80 billion, $80 billion in one day. And this could be just the beginning. The Chinese government is behaving like a nanny state because the president is apparently paranoid. But why does he fear video games? He thinks they pose an ideological challenge to the Communist Party and that at this rate, they will lose control over the youth, hence the crackdown. Today, a new set of regulations was announced about online gaming. Any game that connects to the internet. These rules apply to that game. China is dictating how it should work. Now, all games are different, but they have one thing in common. They offer incentives. Let me explain. When you log in for the first time, you get a reward. When you open the game the next day, you get more rewards. When you level up, the rewards get bigger, and so it continues. The higher you go, the bigger your reward is. That's how most games work. These incentives are designed to get you hooked. So when you get stuck, when you can't level up, or when you need more powerful upgrades, you're compelled to spend some money so that you can buy those upgrades. If you use your phone to play, you must have seen these. They pop up in the form of in-app purchases. That's how game makers make money. And that's how they get you addicted. Now, China's new rules target these incentives. And what do the rules say? Daily login rewards are banned. Online auctions for upgrades are banned too. And there will be spending limits, meaning gamers cannot buy unlimited upgrades. There's only so much you can spend. As of now, these regulations are quite vague. The wording lacks clarity, the rules are sweeping in nature, and Beijing, being Beijing, has not bothered to clarify. So investors are assuming the worst. They believe that China is coming after gaming companies and their profits. So their stocks tanked today. Tencent was among the worst hit. It is the biggest gaming company, not just in China, but in the world. Tencent, it lost 16% of its value today. That's more than $50 billion in a day. Lost. Then we have NetEase. Their stock dived by a record 28%. Bilibili is another Chinese gaming company. It lost 14%. Put together, these companies lost some $80 billion. There was a mass sell-off. It shows that investors are spooked. And here's something that you must know. Gaming was a lucrative business in China. More than 300 million Chinese citizens play online games. And gaming companies earn big money from them. This year, their revenue is expected to cross $80 billion, but the new rules will hurt these numbers. Although China has been at it for some time, it's been targeting the gaming industry. 2 years ago, some restrictions were imposed. They limited the time that children can spend on games. Young people could play games just on Fridays, weekends, and holidays. And the government even fixed a time, 8 to 9 p.m. That's the only time when you could play. Before this law came into force, China had limited game time on weekdays as well. Kids were allowed just 90 minutes for games. So the message from Beijing was always clear. Play less, study more. And this message came straight from the top, Xi Jinping himself. He has publicly complained about gaming. He says it is hurting the eyes of Chinese children. And their state media took it many steps further. They've called games, and I'm quoting, spiritual opium. Now, any addiction is harmful, including gaming. So reasonable regulation should be fine. But China tends to operate in the extremes. If you're addicted to video games in China, you could end up here. A gaming addiction camp. Officials from the Chinese military run it. It's basically a boot camp where kids are admitted. They dress in military fatigues. And they stay inside what looks like a prison cell. Now look at this. This is a resident of the addiction center. He has been hooked to a medical device. They're measuring his brain activity. Other residents are put through military-style workouts, supervised by this man, Tao Ran, a military doctor. He used to treat heroin addicts. And these days, he runs these gaming addiction centers. He focuses on treating gamers. And this is China for you, where gamers are treated like drug addicts because Xi Jinping has decided that gaming is all evil. Speaking of games, a dangerous one is playing out in the Red Sea. Houthi rebels versus the West. The Houthis made the first move. They picked off commercial ships one by one. So the West responded. They announced a 10-nation maritime coalition, sort of like the Red Sea Avengers. Just one problem though. These Avengers are barely interested. Of course, the US does not admit this. According to them, the coalition is adding new members.
As far as Operation Prosperity Guardian, we've had over 20 nations now sign on to participate. The nations that have agreed to publicly discuss their participation, we've put those out there. Since the announcement on Tuesday, Australia and Greece have also highlighted their participation in this operation.
I know it sounds impressive. 10 nations on Monday, 20 nations by Friday. But who are these members? We know 12 of them. The initial 10 plus Greece and Australia. That leaves 8 unknown countries. Apparently, they don't want to be publicly named. Now, I know masked superheroes are all the rage, but this is the real world. Countries love adding their name to groups and coalitions. So if they're not, it means only one thing. They're not fully invested. And we don't blame them. Even the known members are not keen. Look at Australia. Guess how many soldiers they're sending to the Red Sea? 11. 11 soldiers. No warships, no aircraft, just 11 soldiers. And don't laugh at Australia because the Netherlands is sending 2 soldiers. Norway is sending 10. So the question is, where is the new hardware that was promised? Well, France and Britain have sent warships, again with a rider. The French ships will remain under French command. They will not take orders from the US. As for new deployments, there is no word. Same with Italy. They're sending a warship to the Red Sea, but it's not part of the US mission. It's part of existing operations, apparently. You know what all this reminds me of? A bad party thrown by a good friend. You can't skip it, nor can you stay for long. So what do? Token participation. It may save your friendship, but it won't save the Red Sea. More ships are being rerouted. Hong Kong's OOCL is the latest to make the announcement. Their ships will avoid the Red Sea. Instead, they will sail around Africa. And these route changes have consequences. Oil markets are spooked. Shipping rates are up and exporters are worried. Just look at the Chinese market. Shipping rates from China to the Mediterranean are up 44%. Imagine that, 44% rise in 1 month. Even Indian exporters are reporting similar numbers, 30 to 40% jump. So I guess the obvious question is this: has the Red Sea force failed? We'd say fail may be a strong word, but the start is not impressive. Yesterday, we told you why Arab countries have not joined, especially Saudi Arabia. They fear reprisals from the Houthis. But tonight, let's look at Western nations. Among them, only one seems interested: the United Kingdom. They've put a warship under US command. Their foreign minister is also lobbying in the Arab world. He was in Cairo on Thursday. He tried hard to get Egypt on board.
It will be damaging to Egypt, it will be damaging to Britain, damaging to the whole world if there are these repeated attacks on shipping. That is what Operation Prosperity Guardian is all about, and Britain is proud to take part in that with British ships trying to help keep those sea lanes open.
Does it work? Honestly, did it work rather? We don't know. Maybe Egypt is one of those 8 anonymous members, or maybe it's not. There's no way to know, which brings us to why Western states are reluctant. A, there is lack of trust in the US. They haven't hit back at the Houthis. It's almost like Joe Biden is holding back. And B, this coalition is not the only solution to the problem. There's a much easier one: end this war. Just look at all of America's partners: France, Australia, Spain, Canada, Norway. These are all countries that call for a ceasefire in Gaza. If the war ends, so do the attacks in the Red Sea. And that's what the Houthis have said. It's only the US that doesn't want a ceasefire. So can you really blame Paris or Canberra or Madrid? They want a ceasefire. They know a ceasefire will end the Red Sea problem. They also know the US can do it. Yet they're being asked to send warships and soldiers. So the hesitation is not a surprise. And we're not saying that the coalition will not work. It's too early for such an assessment. But it does reveal the problem with America's approach: a military solution to a political problem. When was the last time that worked? I have a question for you. Who is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's closest partner in Europe? If you watch Instagram Reels, I know your answer, but no, it is not Giorgia Meloni. It is Emmanuel Macron, the President of France. Macron and Modi don't have a hashtag, but they have something much more important, a good track record. And next month, we will see a new chapter of this relationship because Macron is coming to India. He will be chief guest at the Republic Day parade, so all the speculation can end. New Delhi had tried to get Joe Biden as chief guest. It was quite the plan. First the Republic Day parade, then a Quad summit with Japan, Australia and the US. That was the plan. Unfortunately, it fell through. So now Macron is coming. Let's get some numbers out of the way first. Macron has visited India twice. First in 2018 for a state visit and then again in September this year for the G20. His trip next month will be his third. Is he the first French leader to attend the Republic Day parade? No, he's the fifth. Jacques Chirac was chief guest in 1976 and 1998. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing in 1980. Nicolas Sarkozy in 2008. And François Hollande in 2016 tells a story, doesn't it? Macron's visit is sort of like a reciprocal trip. Prime Minister Modi had travelled to France in July this year. He was the guest of honour on Bastille Day. Think of it as their Republic Day. Back then, an Indian contingent marched in the parade. Indian pilots also flew Rafales over Paris. And that's a key part of India-France ties, defence cooperation. India's top military seller still remains Russia, but France is now second. Around 29% of India's arms imports come from France. To give you some context, the US is a distant third at 11%. France is at 29%. Some new deals are also in the pipeline. This year, India released a bid for more Rafale jets. Around 26 of them. The deal is worth around $6 billion. And this week, France responded to the bid. Their officials have flown down from Paris. It's now about negotiating, seeing if the price, specifications and requirements match. If they do, a deal could be signed in the coming months. Now, India already uses the Rafale, but that's the Air Force. This new deal is for the Indian Navy. Reports say the jets will be deployed on India's aircraft carriers. And if true, they will replace Russian-made MiGs. Another deal is for submarines. India is already making 6 Scorpene-class subs with France. There is talk of making 3 more. Reports say a deal could be signed later in 2024. As for the delivery, it's going to take time, maybe 2031. So defence remains the cornerstone of India-France relations. But it's not a seller-buyer thing. It's a genuine partnership, one with history as well. Independent India's first major defence deal was in 1949. It was with France, 1949. In 1982, they gave India nuclear fuel. The Americans refused, so Paris stepped up. In 1998, France did not sanction India after the nuclear tests. In fact, their president was chief guest on Republic Day. So what's the secret here? Well, the leaders deserve a lot of credit, including Prime Minister Modi and President Macron. They have excellent chemistry. You can see that from the pictures and videos. There's a level of comfort with each other. It's also because of shared strategic goals. We can think of 3. Number 1, the vision of a multipolar world. Yes, France is part of the Western Bloc, but Macron is not tied to such rigidities. He wants Europe to become a pillar of geopolitics, not just a US sidekick. India too has openly called for a multipolar world. So that's one point of convergence. Point number 2, the Indo-Pacific. France has physical presence in the Indian Ocean, an island called Reunion. It's home to the French military. It's what makes Paris an Indian Ocean power. And number 3, a habit of non-interference. Paris never lectured India on buying Russian oil, often not criticizing Russia's war. Just look at what happened in 2019 after India revoked Kashmir's autonomy. Macron did not criticize. He also said third-party mediation is not required and India appreciates such understanding, especially from a European power. Of course, New Delhi has repaid that faith. In July this year, before Modi's visit, Paris was a mess. An Arab boy had been shot dead by the cops, so thousands of people were protesting on the streets. Shops were vandalized, vehicles were torched, but Prime Minister Modi did not reschedule his trip. The government says it wasn't even on the table for discussion. It tells you about the level of trust. In simple words, France and India can count on each other. Like after the AUKUS snub, France was left high and dry by its Western partners. So who did Macron reach out to? Prime Minister Modi. Expect more of that chemistry next month. It may not be the most flamboyant or talked about relationship, but India and France tick the important boxes: predictability, reliability, and stability. Our next story is from the United Kingdom. It is sliding into a recession. The economy is shrinking and the latest economic data does not look good. The UK's GDP has contracted by 0.1%. In other words, the British economy has shrunk. This was between July and September. The July to September quarter, there was negative growth. The quarter before that, April to June, there was zero growth. Now, technically, a recession is 2 successive quarters of negative growth. The UK has seen zero and then negative. So if this quarter is equally bad, it will officially be in recession. But the people of Britain are not waiting for an official declaration. They say recession is already here. There is no growth, there are fewer jobs, poor increments and high costs. In October, wages in the UK grew by 7.3%. It sounds like a decent figure until you take inflation into account. Then the real wage growth stands at just 1.4%. So even if your salary grew, you're not going to feel it. It will hardly reflect in your bank balance. And other indicators are not looking good either. In March, around 10 million Britons were jobless. That's about 25% of the UK's population. Rail fares are rising. The announcement came today. Ticket prices will increase by almost 5% effective next year or next month, whichever way you look at it. So just like their weather, their economy looks gloomy. At this point, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is perhaps the only person who can see the silver lining.
You should believe me when I say this is the best country in the world to invest and to do business, because of that unique combination of a competitive tax system, our culture of innovation, and our people.
Sunak gave that statement a few days ago. He was hosting an investment summit. More than 200 CEOs were in attendance. But did they buy the Prime Minister's sales pitch? There may have been a few takers, but arguably not enough to alter the popular assessment. And this is quite a fall for a country that used to be an economic powerhouse. The erstwhile empire is now a pauper. And we are not the ones saying this. This has come from experts who gave the UK a new label last year. They called it, and I'm quoting, one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. On what grounds? Wages in France and Germany are better than the UK. National debt is at an all-time high here, more than 100% of the UK's GDP. And the labour force is not as productive. On this front, the UK lags behind countries like France, Germany, Sweden, even the United States. Once a former Prime Minister even said that British workers are lazy. As of today, 2 million people in the UK go without food for at least one day in a month. 1 in 3 children live in poverty. And if you remove London from the UK, the country is as poor as Mississippi, which is the poorest state of America. But let's not just go by statistics and statements. Let's ask a more fundamental question. How should we gauge the strength of great nations? What differentiates the good from the great? It is their crisis management skills, among others, their ability to survive a crisis. Can they do it alone, or do they need help of others to sail through? Where does the United Kingdom stand? Will it be able to survive this economic crisis on its own? It may not. Britons themselves have doubts. In 2016, Mark Carney made a statement. He was the governor of Bank of England, the central bank of the UK. He was speaking about Brexit and its fallout, and this is what he said. Britain may need, and I'm quoting, the kindness of others to finance its deficits. Mark Carney was referring to borrowers here, the creditors of the UK government, the lenders rather. Basically, he was hinting at debt relief. And this statement speaks volumes. The great in today's Great Britain may just be its debt and suffering. To Ukraine now, where action is picking up. Kiev was hit by a mass drone attack today. Apparently 28 Russian drones rained on them. They came in several waves. Ukrainians say they shot down 24 of them. This is the sixth such attack this month. It shows a clear pattern. Russia has assumed an offensive posture while Ukraine's counteroffensive has failed. Western aid is dwindling and morale is down on the front lines. The question is, can Ukraine survive another winter of war? Our next report tells you.
Ukraine usually celebrates Christmas on January 7th. It's according to the Julian calendar, the same one Russia uses. But this time, the holiday season will come earlier. This is the first year ever that Ukraine will mark Christmas on December 25th. New date, but the traditions remain the same. And so does the situation. It's another holiday overshadowed by the war. On Friday morning, the capital woke up to a barrage of drone attacks. 28 drones were launched towards Kyiv. Ukraine took down 24 of them. They damaged apartments and injured 2 people, but there were no casualties. It was the 6th such attack on Kyiv this month. And not just the capital, the drones hit Ukraine everywhere. Central Ukraine was hit, and so was the west and the south. It was a mass drone attack by Russia. And according to Ukraine, it is par trend. Kyiv had warned about it in November. President Zelensky said that Russian attacks would increase, especially ahead of winter. Their target remains Ukraine's energy infrastructure, aka heating facilities. Last month, over 400 Ukrainian towns were without power because of Russian strikes. This month could be more of the same, and that would be another setback for Ukraine. It's already going through a slump. Kyiv's counteroffensive hasn't worked. Western aid is dwindling. Plus, soldiers are openly talking about being unhappy.
The people's motivation is dying out. If some are forced to fight against their will, our army won't be as motivated to fight.
There is no point in mobilizing huge amounts of people and then leaving them without equipment. I can't say much else. You can see for yourself what is happening here, at this exact place. How many protests? They are all happening for a reason.
Ukraine wants to mobilize 500,000 more people. But the people are asking, for what? The gains are very few. Winter is here, and fighting will only get more difficult till March. Also, Russia is on the offensive. Putin knows Western aid is on hold for now, so he is striking harder. Russian forces aim to push deeper into eastern Ukraine. Putin needs this momentum to fuel his re-election campaign. As for Ukraine, it's on the defensive. It is struggling to protect its reclaimed territories. From the north to the east, the momentum of their offensive has slowed down. Ukraine's leader may say that they are not giving up, but for the soldiers on the front lines, the sentiment is very different.
45 days, it's a critical period when soldier can stay and, let's say, have a chance to stay mental healthy. So after 45s, almost everyone will be broken in a way. And we have situation when they can be a very long time, much longer. And they are getting a lot of concussions, a lot of combat fatigue is very prevalent, I would say.
So the soldiers are tired, morale is low, conditions are harsh. Counteroffensive is not even on the cards. Their goal for now is simple: survive the winter without losing many men.
Video from the scene showed armed police on the street and people hiding on the ledge of a building. Police sealed off the square and the area adjacent to the building, located in a busy part of town. Gun crime is relatively rare in the Czech Republic.
So I was at my faculty, which is in Troya. It's about 20 minutes away from at the Faculty of Philosophy, at the Faculty of Arts, and I was in class. Someone, one of my classmates, was looking at Twitter, I'm not sure, the news, and I think everyone was just in a state of shock. Again, these things don't happen here. We weren't really sure what to do. Do we stay in class? Do we leave? I never thought that I was in any immediate danger, you know. I go to a separate faculty. Again, it's a different location, but there was, again, just this incredible discomfort, like, you know, is this, you know, what's happening? It's chaos.
Could have been anyone.
It could have been any faculty.
I was reaching out to everybody that I could think of, and people from abroad were asking me where I was and if I was safe. And my little brother actually messaged me asking if I'm okay. I really can't even come to understand what's happened here today.
I came here because I wanted to light a candle in memory of students who died today in a massacre, in school shooting, in university close by. I was really shocked, and I tried to check that everybody who I know is from the faculty is okay, and I also checked my girlfriends.
When does sport get serious? Different people will have different answers, but here's one. It's serious when prime ministers weigh in, and it's reached that stage in Australia. There is a standoff between a cricketer and the ICC, that's the International Cricket Council. Let me introduce the cricketer first. Usman Qayyum. He plays for the Australian side. Last week, he was part of a test match between Australia and Pakistan. Qayyum turned up like this, with a black armband. So the ICC was not happy. They charged him with violating its clothing regulations. Now, the black armband is not new. Many teams have worn it before. But there are rules around it. A, you have to take prior permission, which Qayyum did not. And B, it cannot be for a political, religious or racial cause. Normally, armbands are worn under different circumstances, like if a former player passes away or if a natural disaster has struck. Non-political and non-controversial events. Did Qayyum have a similar reason? He says he did.
For me personally, you know, dealing with the ICC, I don't think being reprimanded for wearing a black armband, which the ICC asked me on day 2 what it was for. I told it was for a personal bereavement. I never ever stated it was for anything else.
So Qayyum says it was a personal loss. Then why isn't the ICC believing him? Because of what happened before the match. Qayyum turned up to training wearing these shoes. It said, "All lives matter." It was a reference to the war in Gaza. Qayyum has spoken openly about it. He has criticized the killing of innocent children and civilians. But again, the cricket bosses were not happy. They asked him to wear the shoe. Not wear the shoe, rather. Qayyum agreed, but he made his stand clear.
I'm not taking sides. Human life to me is equal. One Jewish life is equal to one Muslim life, is equal to one Hindu life, and so on. I'm just speaking up for those who don't have a voice. The ICC have told me that I can't wear my shoes on field because they believe it's a political statement under their guidelines. I don't believe it is so. It's a humanitarian appeal. I will respect their view and decision, but I will fight it and seek to gain approval.
Days later, he turned up with black armbands. Just him, not his teammates, which is why the ICC was not happy. They believe Khwaja was making a political statement, maybe expressing support for Gaza. If the charges hold, he will get a formal warning. If he keeps doing it, he will be fined. Khwaja says he won't, that the armband will be gone by the next match. What do his teammates think about this? Most of them are in support, including Captain Pat Cummins. He said all lives matter is a non-controversial statement. Even Australia's Prime Minister agrees.
I think that Usman Qayyum is a great Australian cricketer, and that the position that he put forward is one that I think is pretty uncontroversial, one that all lives are equal is a sentiment that I think is uncontroversial.
It's a tough call, really. Athletes have a lot of power and influence. You want them to champion important causes. But which causes are political? Which ones are non-controversial? And should there be a blanket ban on political expression? I'm afraid it's not a yes or no question. And I'll explain why I say this. Football players in Europe are a good case study. Like Yusuf Attal. He was suspended by Nice for sharing an anti-Semitic message. Karim Benzema is another example. He shared a message in support of Gaza. The French Interior Minister accused him of ties with the Muslim Brotherhood. Clearly an overreaction. My point is, players tend to have opinions, like all people do. And sometimes these opinions divide and enrage people, which is why rules are important. Should political statements be allowed in sports or not? Just consider the Khwaja case. His shoe said all lives matter. In this context, it is non-controversial. But what about in the US? You may remember the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. Back then, neo-Nazis came up with their own slogan, all lives matter. So in that context, it is controversial. It was equivalent to denying racism. Also, assume that you allow political messages in sports. What if someone decides to promote vaccine hesitancy or conspiracy theories? So it could be a slippery slope. Supporting bodies or sporting bodies must also take some of the blame here. You cannot pick and choose your causes. That seems to be the problem now. Taking the knee is common before every football match. Again, it's a protest against racism. Most footballing bodies promote it. In fact, even referees take the knee before matches. If that is fine, why is supporting Palestine not fine? Do you see the problem here? You can't say one cause is fine and the other is not. As for the players, the message is quite simple. Rules are there for a reason. If you don't agree, take the official route. But flouting them does not help anyone. I'm sure hundreds of kids look up to Khwaja. Is he telling them breaking rules is fine if your cause is right? I hope not. We're not saying athletes should be robots without opinions. But there's a time and place for it. You can release messages on social media or hold a press conference. No sporting body will prevent that, hopefully. But on the field, it's their rules. It's holiday season in the Czech Republic, but the nation is in mourning. On Thursday, its capital, Prague, witnessed its worst mass shooting in history. 13 people died, 25 were wounded, and the gunman has killed himself. What was the motive behind this attack? The police say it's not terrorism. The gunman was a 24-year-old student, excellent in studies. But he had a dark side. Reports say on a personal Telegram channel, he talked about killing people. Plus, he had easy access to guns. The Czech Republic's gun laws are incredibly lax. Will this shooting change that? Our next report tells you.
It was the afternoon of 21st December. Prague was gearing up for Christmas. Holiday cheer was all around. That's when disaster struck. A mass shooting. It was the worst shooting in the history of the Czech Republic. 13 people dead, 25 wounded, some of them seriously injured. The gunman too is dead. He was a 24-year-old student named David Kozak. He had no criminal record, but what he did have was a huge arsenal of guns.
The information that the shooter is a student of the faculty and that he was supposed to attend a class today, we found that out ourselves. His class was supposed to start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but in the building on Seletna Street, which is a different building less than 1 kilometer away from the shooting scene.
The shooting began around 3 p.m. local time at the Charles University. It's located at the heart of historic Prague. The massacre began at the Arts Faculty building. The gunman entered and opened fire. There was no specific target. He just shot people at random.
From what happened in the beginning, there was a couple of bangs. I didn't even realize it's a shooting. Then suddenly there were students and teachers running out of the building of the philosophical faculty.
Some students locked classroom doors with chairs. Others tried to flee. Many even jumped off the ledge. Outside, people were screaming and running. The police arrived quickly, but it took them some time to track down the gunman. Around 20 minutes later, the police only got to the body. The gunman had killed himself. So what's the motive behind this shooting? There's no link to terrorism or extremist ideologies. The gunman was not part of any groups, ideological or otherwise. The police say he was a history student and an excellent one at that. So what led him to do this? Well, no one knows yet. But Kozak had talked about this before on his Telegram channel. He treated it like a diary. It's here that he mentioned about a school shooting. He said he always wanted to kill. But those 13 people weren't his only victims. He's also suspected of killing his father right before the shooting.
At 12:45, we received information that a dead man was found in the same village, and we soon found out that he was the father of the suspect who committed this heinous act today.
The police are also linking him to the death of 2 other people, a father and a newborn baby. That happened a week before. So how did Kozak kill so many people? Well, he had legal guns, several of them. The Czech Republic has liberal gun laws. To obtain a gun legally, a person just needs 3 things: a medical exam, a weapon proficiency exam, and no previous criminal record. As of 2022, the Czech Republic has over 1 million legal weapons. So a man who wanted to kill people, mixed with lax gun laws, has given the Czech Republic its worst shooting in history. Will the country now tighten its gun laws?
Apeluji na všechny, aby tento tragický incident.
I'm calling on everybody that they don't abuse this tragedy, that it's not abused politically, that it's not used to attack the police, that it's not used to spread misinformation. And this call is to everybody, to politicians, to the media, to citizens, to everybody who has access to social media. Because we need, in a situation like this, is first and foremost, is piety, restraint and togetherness.
The attack may not seem big compared to countries like the US, but for Europe, it's one of the largest death tolls of any mass shooting this century. In the Czech Republic, gun crime is very rare. The last one was in 2019. A gunman killed 6 people. So, as Prague wakes up this holiday season, a somber reality has set in the city. It was once one of the safest capitals in Europe, but has this shooting changed that?
Now let's turn to the Sudan. It's been in the grip of a civil war. On one side is Sudan's military junta, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. On the other side is General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemeti. He commands the paramilitary group called the RSF, that's Rapid Support Forces, RSF. Now, both these generals used to be allies. They worked together to orchestrate a coup in 2021. But this year, in April, they had a falling out, and that's when the fighting began. It has claimed more than 12,000 lives and displaced millions of people. In the last few months, the fighting has slowed down. Neither side was making gains. But then something shifted. Hemeti's RSF started gaining ground. Look at their progress this month. They captured Sudan's second largest city, Wad Madani. They've also captured the war-torn region of Darfur. And they're steadily pushing south. What is the Sudanese army doing? They're targeting a different opponent, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. 15 Emirati diplomats have been expelled from the Sudan. The order came from the army chief Burhan. The diplomats were reportedly given just 48 hours to leave. The Sudanese army is also exchanging harsh messages with the UAE. They're engaging in harsh exchanges. It seems tensions between the two Arab states are coming to a head. And you may be wondering why. What does the UAE have to do with Sudan's civil war? Well, Burhan and his junta have made a charge. They believe that Abu Dhabi is secretly backing Hemeti and the RSF. They're not the only ones who think so. These reports have been floating around for months now about a tie-up between the Emiratis and the RSF. In August, reports said that the UAE was sending weapons to them, allegedly disguised as aid shipments. This aid was bound for Sudanese refugees who'd taken shelter in the neighboring nation of Chad, but instead of bread, the Emirati shipments contained bullets, also assault rifles and small arms. Now, the UAE has denied all of this, of course. They say they're not taking sides in the Sudan conflict. And for a while, the Sudanese army did not say anything either, but that silence broke last month. Burhan's second in command publicly condemned the UAE. He called it, and I'm quoting, a state mafia. He said they had taken the path of evil by supporting Hemeti. Again, the UAE denies it, and there is no solid proof of their involvement. But look at the bigger picture. The UAE is ruled by Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, popularly known as MBS, who's been the de facto ruler of the kingdom since about 2014. And it's around that time that he started cooperating with Hemeti. Hemeti's RSF sent troops to help the UAE in 2015. That's when the UAE was active in Yemen. Hemeti helped them. And since then, they've shared good ties. The UAE and RSF have shared business interests in Sudan as well. What kind of business? Well, Hemeti is a warlord with his own personal army. So, of course, he controls natural resources as well, specifically gold. He controls some gold mines. And over the years, he's become rich by selling that gold. And the UAE happens to be a major buyer. It is one of the biggest gold importers in the world. In 2021, it imported gold worth $43 billion. That's about 10% of the world's gold imports. And Abu Dhabi bought a lot of it from the Sudan, and Hemeti reportedly benefited from this trade. It's likely that the UAE wanted to keep its gold supply steady. But does that mean they secretly backed Hemeti in the Sudan civil war? The Sudanese army believes so, and now they're engaged in a diplomatic spat. But will it change anything in the Sudan? Will the UAE back off if they're really involved? Or will this escalate further? We'll be tracking this story for you. Meanwhile, another African country is in the headlines, and that is Angola, the 7th largest in the continent by size, the 8th largest in terms of GDP. Angola is one of the better off African nations. And a major reason for this is oil. Angola is the 2nd largest oil producer in sub-Saharan Africa, but lately its oil output has been stifled by the global oil cartel, OPEC. OPEC has been slashing oil production for months. This is to control oil prices globally. The most recent cut was announced on the 30th of November. Now, Angola has been complaining about these production cuts for a while, and it has finally reached a breaking point. Yesterday, Angola officially left OPEC, breaking with the cartel after about 16 years. But were the production quotas the only reason for this split? Or was there some geopolitics involved too? Our next report has the answers.
Angola has left OPEC. That's the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. It's the group of nations that controls a majority of the world's oil exports. OPEC is now down to 12 members. Angola parted ways yesterday, and the split wasn't amicable. This is Diamantino Pedro Azevedo, Angola's Minister of Mineral Resources, Petroleum and Gas. He announced the split from OPEC yesterday, and he didn't mince his words. He said, "We feel that at this moment, Angola gains nothing by remaining in the organization, and in defense of its interests, it decided to leave." He added, "When we see that we are in organizations and our contributions, our ideas do not produce any effect, the best thing is to withdraw." Harsh words. But it won't surprise anyone following the global oil trade. Oil prices have been volatile over the last few months. They reached a peak of about $140 per barrel last March, in the immediate aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But they've been stabilizing ever since. So, to prop up prices, OPEC Plus has been slashing production. OPEC Plus basically is the global oil cartel and friends. They all export oil. They tweak oil prices, mostly by adjusting their oil production. Now this works well for the rich OPEC members. They can afford to lower production. But the strategy doesn't work out too well for the smaller members, like Nigeria and now former member Angola. The two nations are the biggest oil producers in sub-Saharan Africa. Angola produces about 1.1 million barrels of oil per day, Nigeria about 1.3 million. It's not much compared to Saudi Arabia's almost 9 million barrels per day, or Iraq's 4.2 million. This is why the African nations haven't been too keen on cutting production. They need to sell their oil for valuable foreign exchange. But despite this, OPEC Plus announced a production cut in November. It was a voluntary cut. Only 8 countries agreed to it. But it was seen as setting the tone for next year. OPEC is expected to slash production throughout 2024, and the next cuts may not be voluntary. So Angola decided it had seen enough. It has walked out of OPEC. But there could be another reason for Angola's exit. On the day OPEC announced the last oil cut, Angola's president was in a meeting with US President Joe Biden.
Simply put, the partnership between Angola and America is more important and more impactful than ever. And we're all in with you in Angola.
Biden announced a $1 billion investment in an African rail corridor, linking copper-rich regions in Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the Lobito port in Angola. The project may help transform trade in Angola, and it's a great way to get the country on Washington's side as well. The US has been trying to make inroads into Africa, wanting to wean the continent away from its rivals Russia and China. OPEC has also been acting against US interests for a while. Washington has opposed OPEC's production cuts, so Angola leaving OPEC is definitely a victory for the US. Did the meeting with Biden have anything to do with Angola's decision? There's no proof of that yet, but it seems too convenient for it to be a coincidence.
Our last story tonight is for everyone aged 11 and above. I'll explain the math later. It's about the world's greatest home invader. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He works one day a year, then spends the rest of it judging you. You guessed it, I'm talking about Santa Claus. Spoiler alert, he doesn't exist. Hopefully, you already knew that. After all, there is a narrow window when people believe in Santa. It happens during childhood. Research says the more live Santa Claus's children are exposed to, the more likely they are to believe that he exists. Now, Santa is big in America, so about 85% young American children believe in him, especially till the age of 5. Then a shift happens between the ages of 7 and 10, and then there is decline in belief. What about outside America? In Europe, more than 90% children believe in Santa up to the age of 8. In other continents, the percentage is lower. But the age group is similar, including here in India, where most children stop believing in Santa after the age of 8. That may not be good news for some parents. While children believe in Santa Claus, parents can finally play Secret Santa without hating it. Seriously, according to surveys, nearly half of office workers hate Secret Santa. But with the arrival of Christmas comes an annual conflict for many parents, a haunting question. Is Santa real? Should parents lie and preserve a sense of childhood? Or should they spout some spoilers? The answer, we think, is subjective. But it is becoming objectively harder to keep the secret thanks to the internet. The answer is a Google search away, but research says there isn't much to worry about. Contrary to what you might expect, about half the children feel good after discovering about Santa. And that is the magic of Santa Claus, you could say. His myth is an open secret. People seem to be okay with that. Even Santa's origin story is unclear, and that is okay too. One assumption is that his imagery is based on Saint Nicholas, the 4th century bishop of Myra, or modern-day Turkey. It is said that he gave away his wealth to help the poor. The second assumption is marketing. Santa was introduced as a commercial figure in ads for the Coca-Cola company in 1931. So Santa may be a folklore or a triumph of marketing, but has he managed to persist? Or is Santa losing his edge? There was a pandemic slump, of course. Christmas 2020 was a washout. Christmas 2021 was muted. But since 2022, everyone has wanted a piece of Santa. Santa bookings are skyrocketing. Their wages are up too. A Santa's average pay for an event stands at $275. This could be for a home visit or a corporate party. It is even higher for store or mall appearances. Santas earn about $4,000 through them. On a major Santa hiring platform, there are 20 clients for one hired Santa. This is double the demand than pre-pandemic times. Santa has even helped the stock market. It's called the Santa Claus rally. And it happens the world over, where the stock market goes up by about 1% during Christmas time. Santa boosts the dying art of letter writing too. His dedicated postal code attracts 500,000 letters every year, 500,000 letters. Santa is also boosting tourism, especially in Finland. At this time of the year, 20 airliners a day land in its capital, Lapland. People make their way to Santa's so-called official hometown, the Santa Claus village. Despite freezing temperatures and 22-hour-long flights, people have traveled there from 180 countries so far, only to sit on Santa's lap and get a picture clicked. $60 a pop. Many of them are not even Christians. The largest single group of visitors are the Chinese. In fact, in 2010, President Xi Jinping, who was not president then, also posed for pictures with Santa, and do not worry, he did not sit on Santa's lap. They sat side by side like two powerful men. But many do and will continue to. Santa may not be real, but his spirit of generosity is. He helps children understand the concept of giving. He makes adults do special things despite their skepticism. And if that is not enough, it hardly matters really, because as long as we have capitalism, Santa will be big money.